guys, welcome back to my channel and welcome back to the floor of my bedroom. That isn't the tidiest, but we're gonna overlook it and move past it swiftly. I hope I'm in focus. I don't have my glasses or my contacts on, so I really can't see. So it's all the one experience to me. It's fuzzy regardless. But I hope you guys are doing well and have had a good, I suppose, start to 2025. I'm really glad that January is done because it did feel really long. It wasn't a bad month by any means, but it was certainly a month. It felt chunky. It felt like it went on. But today I wanted to chat briefly. I love when I say briefly because it just doesn't happen. Like, briefly doesn't exist. Chat about my 2-year Addison's disease / adrenal insufficiency diagnosis, which was actually in the second week of January, but I was in a work panic and didn't film it then. So we're filming it now, but it's fine. I know I did a 1 year and I can't really remember what I said, and I find it so hard to look back on those videos when big life things are happening, because it's like I feel all the sympathy for myself, my past self, that I didn't allow myself to feel when I was that present version of myself. So I find that really hard. So I don't know what I said, but today I'm going to go through, I suppose, what's changed the most in the last year, what I wish I knew this time last year when I was 1 year in, and some peaks as well. So if that sounds like your kind of thing, feel free to stick around. So I suppose first what I'd like to talk about is what's changed most notably throughout the last year. I have some notes here if I glance down, just kind of bullet points, because I knew I'd forget them. What has changed, the first big thing I think it's a big thing because it's not as time consuming for myself, is I don't have to keep as extreme notes on my symptoms and everything, as detailed, as consistent. I do still keep a track of how much hydrocortisone I take a day, my symptoms and things, but I do it through an app now, called Visible, just in case anyone's interested. But before, I knew those apps existed, but they weren't detailed enough. I needed to keep track of everything to understand the highs and the lows, and what I did on a day that felt good with my medication, how I reacted to changes in temperature more, what would happen if I had the flu versus a stomach bug versus a migraine, how I would feel when I was on my period versus not, all of these kind of things. So I don't feel as though I have to do that now, because more of it feels intuitive. But that kind of goes hand in hand with the next biggest change, which is that the lows I experience, like the physical lows of low cortisol symptoms, are not as extreme. They do, or I suppose they don't get as extreme as quickly, maybe is what I mean. In the first year post-diagnosis, I felt that if I was having low cortisol symptoms, which could have been, because I hadn't noticed that something was stressing me out that much, and I didn't take any extra hydrocortisone for it, so therefore you're kind of living in a deficit for a while until that will become so symptomatic that you notice it. That would happen, that crash would happen so fast and so almost violently. It would be like I would be fine, and then I would be bent over with a migraine, wanting to vomit, unable to, the brain fog would be so intense, my muscles would ache so intensely. Now that would still happen, but the crash into that is so much more slow, so that I can catch it much quicker. It's much more a case of now, I might notice, oh, my mouth is getting a bit dry. And because I know myself better, so it's all connected really, I know myself better and I understand Addison's disease more, I might ask myself, oh, am I feeling a little off? Okay, that thing that happened, on the way to work, like a bike nearly crashing into me, that really freaked me out and scared me, but I didn't catch it. Is that actually having a physical impact on me? Or that emotional upset in this family situation that I heard about last night on the phone with my parents, that's actually having quite an impact. All of those are things I didn't I suppose I didn't necessarily understand were as nuanced and small. So that, coupled with not having, I suppose, any kind of reserve of health at all after being so low pre-diagnosis, meant that in my first year those crashes would happen so quickly, and then I was much longer crawling out of them, because I suppose you've gone so much deeper and lower into them. Whereas now I think I can pick up the nuances quicker, but also the actual crash is much smaller. I notice that even when I get sick now, if I have like just a flu or a head cold, because that is one of the nice changes this year, is I think I'm sick less often than I was the first year, which was still an improvement on pre-diagnosis. So I'm not really sick often, but if I did have a head cold or a flu, I wouldn't, my low cortisol symptoms would be fairly mild, generally. I'm saying that now and I'm like, mostly, I think. And they are much more noticeable. So that is a hugely beneficial change. It also means I feel like I have the capacity to explain Addison's disease to others when I'm in those low cortisol moments, whereas before, if I was with friends or things, it just wasn't conducive to a conversation of educating them on what I needed. I just could not function. Whereas now I feel like, oh, I can explain, here's what's happening with me, I'm just going to sit down for a while. Whereas before, those conversations just weren't possible, really. And I think I was expecting a lot of myself, to expect myself to be able to be a host for difficult conversations whilst also feeling so poor across the board, really. So that is a major change. That's such a good change. So another good change in the last year, as opposed to my first year post-diagnosis, is I think my weight has stabilized a good bit more, or is stabilizing a bit more. I was told when I was diagnosed I did need to be on I was on a higher dose of steroids at the start of post-diagnosis, because I was so low, to kind of crawl back any semblance of being upright, I guess. I was told that would cause, weight gain, and there'd be bloating, there'd be, because steroids don't cause, I suppose, weight gain, they cause water retention. They can increase your appetite and make you eat more, which I think definitely happened in the early few months, but I didn't think my appetite was the biggest issue with weight gain. I think it was water, because there was two kind of components to weight gain. One was quite a healthy weight gain, where I had become very deconditioned, I had lost huge amounts of muscle, my face had become quite hollow, any of my kind of softness was gone, so there was gaining that back, and also being able to move more, meaning I actually just put on more muscle, which has increased then in this year more because I'm exercising again. But then there's also the water retention, and that feels different. It's very hard to explain, but if you've had water retention from medication or steroids, I think you'll know what I mean. It's like when I would have to increase my dose because I was sick or something like that, I could feel the tautness of my skin. It's like I could feel my face and my arms, or like I don't know, my whole body just felt really like water was trying to push out, like the skin was taut. It didn't feel like a very normal weight gain. You know, the way if you gain weight, you might notice it, you might be uncomfortable with it, but it still feels like your body. This felt like a foreign addition to your body, I guess, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's a pretty good one, is kind of having weight as a stable. Obviously, if I do have to increase steroids drastically for a few days or something, I am going to retain more water and things. But I feel like it's much less, once again, probably similar to the highs and the lows. It's not as dramatic, and it's not as all-consuming, and I think it falls off faster. I'm still not used to this body. I don't know if I mentioned it in my year 1 Addison's video about body image and weight. I hope I did, because I hope I was honest, because I was struggling to an extreme degree at that point with my body image. I'm still struggling pretty badly with how I look and how I am, and the days in which you know, because of steroids, my face doesn't feel like my face, or having really nice outfits I can wear to work one week, but then they don't fit the next week, but they fit the week after that. That's very disorientating, and it's very hard to find a common sense of self in that. And because I'm someone who is, I suppose, look, realistically, it's probably because I'm autistic, I really need to feel connected to my body to feel anchored in the world. It's not okay to feel like I'm me in my mind, but not me in my body. And that makes me feel really disorientated. So it's still something I'm working on, is getting used to how I am and how I look, and that this actually, I suppose, getting used to seeing my body as it is now as not a problem to be solved, but rather an experience to thrive within. And I am getting help for that and things like that, but I do think it does help to not have the extreme weight gain and then loss, weight gain and loss of when I have to increase steroids. Sorry, I have to like unwrap my leg. It's gone dead. So that is a big plus. I'm hoping it will stabilize more. I was told that, you know, those first few years are a little bit more dramatic. So maybe this time next year will be even better, but I think right now it's not so much important to know the drastic fluctuations in my weight, even though I can't help but notice them. It's more important to, I suppose it's more important that I learn that the body that keeps me alive is the body I should be in, I guess, if that makes sense. I suppose another big change. So in my first year of diagnosis, so from January 23 to January 24, I did not have an adrenal crisis. An adrenal crisis, or an Addison's crisis, is when you know, for example, you might have a stomach bug, and if you're vomiting, you're not able to keep your medication down, so therefore you have no cortisol at all, synthetic or natural. So you can become extremely sick, very serious. It can be fatal. It is a medical emergency. It's extremely serious. And you do need to get IV steroids, and generally also you need to get fluids for your electrolytes, which is completely fine and something I understood in theory, and I was told, I think, by my endocrinologist, or I can't remember if I read it when I was first diagnosed, that like a lot of people have a crisis or two in their first year, because like that your system is so raw that the highs and lows are so extreme that it's much harder to catch those nuanced moments. So when I made it from January to January, that first year without a crisis, I was like, that's great, because it's down to my brain and the amount of work I put into this, the amount of tracking sheets I made, the PDFs I printed, the folders and folders of notes I've done, the monitoring, the amount of mental energy I've given this. So I kind of felt a bit superior in my head, but then I had a crisis in March 2024. So, you know, I think it was like the 3rd of March, I had a crisis, and I think I talked about it on my channel somewhere, but so I did have to kind of get over myself, and that happened so fast and so out of the blue. But I suppose the biggest change is recognizing, I think my understanding of a crisis has changed. Number one, in recognizing that it's not something I should live my life in fear of, because if I have put the right things in place, we will know how to handle it. But also, I think my understanding of a crisis has changed, in the sense that I thought that in a crisis I would be able to advocate for myself a lot better, but I like lost the ability to like communicate well and think clearly very quickly into the crisis. That just went out the window. So yeah, I think that's good. I haven't had any other crisis since, so, but I'm not going to put pressure on myself to avoid one, because honestly, anything can happen. I think I've probably come close once or twice since, where if I hadn't been able to maybe keep down a second dose of steroids, it might have deteriorated. But thankfully, you know, I haven't been that sick since, or like haven't been in, you know, maybe a car crash or something that will prevent you from being able to take a dose when you would need something to help you with a bodily stress. So that's a big thing. Another nice change is that my hair and my nails are stronger. I don't know if this is gonna be clear, but I have, when I first got sick back when I was 18 or 19, probably actually around 1920, because it was a few years into being sick, I remember I had really long hair, much longer than is now. It was down to my waist, I think. And I started losing hair from back here. All of my hair just started falling out from back here. Thankfully, it didn't spread beyond that, but I remember finding that really, really strange. But now I have all of these baby hairs growing back that I just don't know what to do with, because they're growing really slowly. But it's very odd because I haven't had them in, I mean, I'm 30 now, so like 10 years. So I think that's a good sign. My hairdresser said my hair is thicker as well, so she could just be saying that. But I do think my hair is thicker. My nails are stronger. I would show you my nails, but these are actually false nails, so that's not really teaching you anything. But my actual nails are stronger and grow faster. Because before I couldn't put false nails on because my own nails were so weak, but now I can. So I think the way I look at it is if those surface things are more stable or more then presumably those small incremental internal changes are happening as well, and that could be really good. Yeah, I think that's good. I mean, my eyes are also not as dry as drastically. I don't think I've noticed anything else absolutely major. Externally, I guess. Certain things haven't changed in terms of like my healing is still quite poor, but my healing was poor prior to diagnosis, so it's poor now. So that's maybe not the biggest change. But it's still nice to. I try not to be annoyed at these little baby hairs because like this one's gotten kind of long. slowly. So me and my hairdresser, we're just letting them be and seeing what the hell they do. So I suppose now I want to talk about things I wish I knew this time last year, even though this time last year I knew so much more than I potentially thought I ever would. But I think it's still good to chat about. I think one of the things I really wish I knew about was the impact of heat. In my first year of post-diagnosis, it wasn't that warm a summer. I didn't travel. I also wasn't working and things, so I was able to I was working actually, I think, but I was only kind of doing part-time. I wasn't fully back to work. I didn't have as much demands on me, so I wasn't up and about as much. But even then in that first year, I did notice that the more sweating I did, the more unstable my electrolytes became, the more aggravated my Addisons became. That was really dramatic this past year, in my second year. Number one, I think because I had more going on. I'm much more like mobile for my job and things now. Like I'm up and about, walking around, I'm outside a lot more. It was also a warmer summer as well. And I also think I spent the bulk of summer I think I spent from the crisis until July. So from March to July, recovering from that crisis. I don't think I was fully right and my electrolytes were fully stable. They felt really erratic and kind of dramatically reactive, really. So that was really difficult. So I wish I knew that heat can be so impactful and not to be so, I suppose not even to like ration electrolytes, because what was I gaining from rationing an electrolyte? Like just take the electrolytes you need to take. Like have the banana, have the sachet of electrolytes. It's not the end of the world. But I also think I wish I knew that, because I spent, I think, the first few weeks of summer feeling like I was unstable in my head, like that actually I'm suddenly coping less. Why can't I cope all of a sudden, you know? Which wasn't true. So I do wish I knew that across the board. I also wish, and this is also a side effect of having the crisis, I think, I wish I knew how, well, I suppose I did know. I suppose this year what I've gained is a wider and broader and deeper understanding of how scary Addison's is to people who love you. I knew that theoretically, but I think in my first year I was still living in such a state of relief that I had a diagnosis that I didn't really come up for air to look around me to see that actually this is quite a serious diagnosis that does require daily monitoring and can be fatal if you don't, and all of those things. Whereas I knew that all of those things, but I knew that the one thing I'm good at is being organised, so I could do that. I was like, oh, that's fine. Like, it's the one thing I can rely on myself to do, is keep track of things and take my meds. And all of that, like, very quickly into it. I didn't need an alarm to take my meds, you know, it was all happening. But I didn't realise that for other people, they weren't having to deal with the everyday minutiae of monitoring Addison's. So it was much more easy for them to think of the what ifs when I went for a drive, of if I was in a car crash. The what ifs if, you know, we received bad news as a family and I didn't immediately updose for it, what that could do. And then I, specifically I suppose my parents didn't appreciate how scary it would be for them to have me move away from home after being home during the bulk of my sickness and the more dangerous times of it. I wish I was more empathetic to that at the time, but I also think if I had been, I would have been really afraid myself. So whilst I wish I'd been more empathetic to other people, I think otherwise I would have limited myself. Whereas I think there is a real joy in diagnosis and a freedom in feeling even marginally better after years of feeling crap, that felt really, I felt liberated to do things like move away and get a different job and like transfer my PhD to Trinity and like all of these things. But I do still wish I'd been kind of, I suppose, more understanding. That understanding has come, and I think that's something additionally, maybe the next thing I wish I knew was that my relationship to having Addison's will probably change. I don't mean my needs around treatment for Addison's will change, even though I'm sure the amount of steroids I need throughout life, depending on what's happening, will fluctuate. What I mean more is that my relationship to knowing that this is life and that I can't maybe do things that other people want to do, and that actually, even though I'm like diagnosed and I'm doing the best I can and I'm trying my best to eat the best I can and all of these things, I still feel tired like other people. I can't do the things other people can. I tried to get back into sports and badminton in the height of summer, in the heat, which I'm trying to be empathetic to my past self for that decision, but I couldn't do it, and it was just devastating repeatedly to feel like I was failing and that I couldn't do it. And I think it's very hard for people around you because they're seeing the logic of, just take a beat, take a minute, don't worry, maybe in September when the weather cools down you can do it. Whereas I'm seeing, is this going to be every summer? I'm going to feel this bad. What happens if I want to travel to a warm country? What if I want to go on a holiday with my friends and they want to go to a beach holiday? I used to love that as a kid. Can I not do that? Or I really want to be able to go on a hike. Can I do that? No, my muscles seize. Or all of these things. I think I wish I could have gone back and told myself it was okay to be angry intermittently about it, and that wasn't a sign of like not coping. That's something I've learned, is that some days I am angry about it, and usually actually not even days, for like an hour maybe, or like half an hour, because of something. I feel such a rush of anger that I'm limited in ways that I'm still learning, and that I mightn't always be, because as I, you know, the longer I'm on steroids, the longer I recover, the more I'll be able to do things. But right now, life can feel small, and it's okay to think that's crap, you know. So I do wish I understood that and was kind of nicer about that. Yeah, I do think I think realistically, if I could go back in time, what I wish I knew this time last year was just more reasons to have empathy for myself and others in my life. But the crisis kind of forced those realizations on me anyway. So, early into 2024, I had to learn it all anyway. Okay, lastly, I suppose to wrap up this video, which I have no idea how long it's going to be, presumably longer than I intended, but alas, you can always increase the speed. I want to talk about kind of peaks of my second year post-diagnosis, and there was a lot of peaks, there really was. In a way, the crisis was a peak. I mean, it was really not. It was like a traumatic experience, but it was in a way because it happened in a really controlled way. I was prepared for it. I had my documents there. I had the injection. I knew what I'd done because it gave me a degree of comfort and confidence in myself. But there was a lot of peaks of things that I did this year that I wouldn't have had energy to do in the first year post-diagnosis, or obviously pre-diagnosis, absolutely not. So first things first, I went to the Ears tour. I bring up the Ears tour at every possible opportunity as I'm like, I saw Taylor Swift twice actually. And everyone in my life is like, I know, be quiet. But I did go to the Ears tour. The Ears tour was at the end of June here in Dublin, and it was warm. It wasn't the biggest heat wave. We'd had, I think, a heat wave the week before, or was it just warm the week before? It was more temperate, so everyone else was like, oh, it's ideal, we won't be sweating too much, all of these things. For me, I would have preferred if it was freezing cold, because I was struggling with the heat. And I probably still wouldn't have needed a jumper. Like, that's how much I was really struggling. So I was really afraid for how long the days would be, the walking, the standing. I did get seated tickets, but realistically, when the music's going, you just gotta commit. And I did commit, I really did. And the length of days, and I was also going twice back to back on a Saturday and a Sunday, so I was really afraid that I wouldn't be able to cope, that I would sweat a lot, not have enough salt, all of these kind of things, forget to take my meds randomly. I don't know why I thought with Taylor Swift in the country I would somehow lose my mind and ability to monitor my illness, but that's the thing that happened. But actually it went really well. I went the first night with my best friend Aoife, and that went really, really well. And then the second night I went with my sister and my mom and my first cousin, Zach. And they were all really tired after and were really struggling. But I think because, I coped the best. But I think it's because I took so many precautions of, I took the Friday off work before and slept all day. I took all of the electrolytes. I did all my stretches for my muscles to try and get the electrolytes moving and all of that. I took the magnesium. I did everything that I think I was probably over-prepared. So everyone else was really, really tired and kind of struggling, whereas I actually was fine. So that was a real peak. That would have been inconceivable to be able to do the year before. So I'm glad she didn't start the Eras tour in Europe and we caught kind of the tail end of Europe. I think tail end of Europe probably. So that was a big one. Another peak was I spent my 30th birthday, not my actual 30th birthday, but I celebrated my 30th birthday, I think 2 weeks after it, with my best friend Dee in the Aran Islands off of Galway. And I had never been to the Aran Islands. Dee loves the Aran Islands. She's been there so many times. I was nervous about going to the Aran Islands, not because there's an abundance of things to do, but because you get around the island by cycling. And I have become obviously really deconditioned. Prior to becoming acutely unwell before diagnosis, I was exercising more, I was doing a lot of yoga, things like that. I felt much fitter, whereas I had, this was going to happen in the end of August, so it was going to be summer. It was warm, it was really warm. It required cycling, and my muscles, I didn't know how I'd cope. I really wanted to go though, so I was like, no, I'm gonna go. And Dee is the kind of person who is, Dee does spin classes and things all the time and is like amazing at cycling. But that didn't stop Dee having a huge amount of patience for me. But I did, I think there was a total of like 14 kilometers cycling that day, and I did it. Was I well afterwards? I wouldn't say I was my best self, but I wasn't unwell. I wasn't in a crisis. I wasn't even near a crisis. I was just like muscle sore, probably like anyone who is unfit, doing that much cycling all of a sudden. There was some points when I was sweating a lot cycling that I just got off and walked and let Dee go ahead because I thought I wasn't maybe wise. But I did it. And that was kind of, I don't know, it kind of made me feel like maybe I can do things too. You know, I couldn't do that every day. I couldn't probably do that again, even like I felt really exhausted, to be honest, after that for about a week. So that had a fatigue impact, but it didn't drive me into a crisis. It didn't bring around low cortisol symptoms and things. So it was certainly still too much, but it wasn't the end of the world, which that kind of thing had started to feel like it was the end of the world, I think. Another real peak for me was throughout summer. So in the start of summer, I was really into the idea of getting back into fitness. I really wanted to get back playing badminton. I had two big problems with this. Number one, it was warm and I was sweating a lot, so I was losing a lot of minerals, and I don't think ultimately, I think it was too soon after the crisis to be back exercising or to be trying to exercise. And the other thing was I had a really bad pain in my ankle. We'll get to the ankle thing in a minute. But I was like, I'll do it anyway. This made me really sick, to be honest, and that is kind of my previous point about being okay to be angry. So what I decided to do instead was walk, like a lot. I did a lot of walking. Where I used to live before I moved was around lakes and things, and I'm so glad I took videos of those because I saw these swans be born and kind of grow up, and I think about them now and I'm like, how are the swans doing? These swans would probably kill me if they could, like, but I don't care. But I did a lot of walking every day, so I went from kind of doing, you know, the walking that was required in work to doing much more walking every day. It became very meditative. It became a place to listen to audiobooks, to sit on the grass, to stop halfway through and go to the shop and get a smoothie and sit down. I'm really glad I bought into that patience, and that I found when I couldn't do the ritual I wanted, which was playing badminton, which I had done when I was younger, I could do that, and I'm glad I did that. Which leads me to the ankle pain, which is my final peak, I think, of 2024, is that I had surgery without complications. Surgery with Addison's disease is a little tricky. It doesn't have to be tricky, but it can be if your Addison's is a little unstable, because I suppose surgery is obviously a stress to the body, a huge stress to the body, obviously. But what it was for me, I suppose, whilst being a big stress to the body, was a way of seeing how stable I was prior to it and managing my anxiety before it and all of that. Typically you do need to be on IV steroids. You also need to get steroids just before the surgery, like an injection or an IV of them and things, just to help you cope, your body cope. I essentially had to have surgery on my ankle because I went about that pain in my ankle. I've mentioned this before, but I had that pain in my ankle had been there for about 4 years. It was not that bad for probably the first 3 years. And then last year it got acutely really, really bad. It was before probably maybe like a 3 or 4 out of 10 every now and then. So it was easy for me to write it off as I rolled my ankle, or I don't know, I must have tweaked my ankle doing something, especially in light of having Addison's and not being diagnosed. I was kind of firefighting one thing the more important thing. But then last year the pain got really bad and I kind of had to go to my GP and say to her, this is really sore. And she's like, how long's it been going on? And I was like, do I lie? And no, I didn't lie. I was like, oh, ages. But she's been with me through thick and thin, so I think she knew the prioritization and how that went. But it turned out, I suppose, that I had a rather large benign tumor on, I suppose, on the ankle, like the top of my foot. I gather on the top of my foot, slightly deep, and whatever way walking around that had become very natural to me. I snapped the ligaments, or tore the ligaments. I can't remember the verb used. The only verb I really remember him using as a surgeon was that he was going to bolt the ligaments. And he was like, I'm going to curtain bolt them. And I remember thinking, I don't want to know this. I don't want to know at all. I discussed with him having Addison's disease before the surgery. He talked to my endocrinologist around protocols and all of that. He had had Addison's patients in the past, so he was like, it's not unheard of to me. I was just really hoping it would all be fine. I'm not someone who finds hospitals acutely stressful. I find them uncomfortable. And I'm not happy about being there, but I wouldn't be having an anxiety attack or be obviously stressed. And the surgery is something I wasn't really nervous for because I don't know what my brain does, but I think I see a professional and I'm like, well, that's your job. you fix my foot. I'm not dealing with it. So I wasn't really stressed. So I think that helped, but all went well, which was really good. And the recovery went well. He was a little bit nervous about the healing because my healing is quite slow. So he did do extra stitching. It ended up being quite a large, he said keyhole for the surgery, and it did not come out as keyhole, but anyway, it was quite a large cut, like from here to here, say, on the ankle, little smiley face. He did use extra stitches, I think, and extra sutures and kept them in longer to allow, he said, just to assist my body in healing. I truly didn't care what he did once all is fine. It's recovering okay now. I have to do a lot of physio, but the peak really of that is that nothing Addison's wise happened. Like none of that was like traumatic or anything. It wasn't to do with Addison's anyway, any difficulties that happened there. So I think that is a peak, because to me that's a mark of stability. Like there was a point last year in my first year post-diagnosis where I really needed to go to the dentist, but I was afraid that if I had to get a filling, that the stress of getting the filling could cause a crisis. That's how like close to the line I was, and if it didn't cause a crisis, I was going to be sick still. So yeah, I think that's all pretty much everything. Looking ahead this year, I don't really think I'm going to try and hold myself to any level of stability. I'm going to just try, like I said, you know, that first year thinking, I'm great, I didn't have any crisis. I'm not going to try and get into that mindset. I'm just going to do the thing of I'm just going to try and keep myself stable, and what happens, happens. I'm going to do my best and control what I can, and beyond that, life's going to happen regardless. So yeah, I think that's good. I'm sorry if this video is very long, very rambly. If you've had a similar experience, even if it's not with Addison's disease or any, you know, your relationship to your diagnosis as the years go on, I think it does evolve. And yeah, I will be back soon with hopefully more videos, but also probably more health updates with some other stuff and things that I'm working through and all of that. But all will be okay, is kind of my motto at the moment. But thank you so much for watching. Thank you for subscribing if you have. If you want to, you can. There's no real pressure. I just like having a space to project these thoughts out to. Yeah, but I hope you guys have a really good week and feel well and live well, whatever that means to you.